Welcome to the Blue Swan. Today we are lucky to have Patrick Kilpatrick. And on that note, would you mind introducing yourself and anything you wanted to mention?
Hi, it's Patrick Kilpatrick, and I wanted to say I hope that you have a joyous holiday season and make sure you hug everybody you love, and we all work together to make the world a better place.
Thanks. That's very humble. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the impact of being raised by someone who has founded Cigna Corporation on your style as an actor and any roles you played?
Well, it's a really interesting question. First of all, he wasn't a Navy SEAL. He was an underwater demolition team guy. Actually, they were called beach jumpers or scouts and raiders in some places. They didn't become the Navy SEALs until 1962 with John F. Kennedy merged the UDT with the Navy SEALs. But so he was trained as an underwater demolition team beach jumper. I didn't really ask him a lot about what he did in World War II. I wish I had talked to him more about that. He talked about World War II in historical terms, but he really didn't get into the personal things that he had done until I asked him directly about 2 weeks before his death. In my best state, in my best persona, I hope I embody my father's instincts for tenacity and courage. I know I'm a blend of my mother and my father, so I don't have always his absolutely even-tempered personality. He was a very gentle giant. He was 6'6", and really, I don't ever remember him raising his voice ever. So he was probably the finest man I've ever known. I'd like to think I embody some of his discipline and tenacity. And I swim regularly. I'm not equating myself in any way to an underwater demolition team person, but I have an affinity for water and I go swimming on a daily basis and it's freezing. And I think about those guys all the time and what they endured. As I've tried to build a company, Uncommon Dialogue Films, I think I got some of his CEO energy, if you will, or gene. So I think that had an impact. I think about those things, but I know everybody's life is their individual. One of the things is he never put pressure on any of us to do anything but what made us happy. So I marvel at his ability to not bring work home because I can't ever. Meanwhile, I seem like I work 24/7 to get our things done, where he seems to have balanced home life a lot better than I ever.
Yeah, so my father was actually a naval captain. He had the Expert Pistol Award. And so before you got into acting, you worked as a bodyguard for bands like Jefferson Airplane and Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead. I'm wondering if you would be willing to sort of take us down the rabbit hole and then through the dark side of the moon into any amusing war stories you may or may not have from that time.
Well, that was a glorious experience. I consider myself really blessed to have done that. I was on the stage with them, and you're supposed to protect them. And they had hired a stripper. So a beautiful nude girl came walking on the stage. And at the time, they hadn't told me. So I thought, this is just another crazed fan. And so I picked her up and carried her off of the stage. And eventually it was revealed that she was part of the act that night, but she wasn't pleased. A lot of things happened. It was a really interesting time because concert promoters and concert goers at that time really didn't want police and so and it was in New York. Eventually it got very, very violent. I came out unscathed, but there were people who were stabbed and all kinds of shotgunned to death. And after about a year and a half, eventually it got so violent, I said it's probably a good idea to duck out. When the police came back in and ended up having to shotgun a kid to death, I thought, well, maybe this is not a good thing to keep doing. But was it glorious to do? Being on the stage with Jimi Hendrix and Jethro Tull, and whether you like these individual bands or not, Procol Harum, Quicksilver Messenger Service. Interestingly enough, with Quicksilver Messenger Service and Grateful Dead, of course, you were sharing the security with the Hells Angels, which really amounted to letting the Hells Angels do whatever they wanted to do. Because if you got into a fight with the Hells Angel, you were going to have a fight with about 30 of them, and that was not going to end up well for you. I saw a lot of great bands, Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, a lot of different venues, Pink Floyd, when they had a one-third size plane crash into the stage in New Jersey. That was part of the act. It was pretty amazing. Very corrupt, made a lot of money. People would give you $100 and you just let them in. And they paid us with 50 tickets to each show, and you were allowed to scalp them. And that was one of the ways that you got paid. Yeah, it was crazy. It was really fun. I mean, frankly, being on the stage with groups like that, I really couldn't go to a concert for decades after that because everything was a letdown after that.
That is an incredible story. I remember the stories about how the Rolling Stones hired Hell's Angels and they paid them in $500 worth of beer.
That was the Fillmore East, yeah. Well, I remember I was standing there one time. They had a big statue like Venus de Milo in the lobby of the Fillmore East, and the Hells Angels just came in and crated it up and took it out. What was I going to do? In those days, Quicksilver Messenger Service and the Grateful Dead, they played for like 9 hours. Guys would walk off the stage and somebody else would come back on and play, and everything was extended acid rock and everything. So the concerts would last 9 hours or so. So it was just much more of a festival deal. Yeah, I was very privileged to see that.
Thanks.
I was splitting my time between advertising writing and journalism. And I was very lucky because the advertising writing was very high paid, relatively speaking. And so that would pay for the journalism stuff. Rolling Stone, I did get some editorial assignments from them, like they were going to send me to Africa, but that didn't manifest itself. I did advertising writing for them, what we call circulation ads. So it was advertising design, the same thing with Life magazine and all the Time Inc. magazines. I was on the 32nd floor and getting paid a lot of money as an advertising writer. And then that would allow me to go to South America and do an article and the journalistic stuff. So when I say I worked for just about every magazine in New York, it's true, but it was either in the capacity as an advertising writer or as a journalist.
Do any of the publications or ads you made stand out to you as of this day?
No, particularly stands out as Interview, Andy Warhol's magazine, which was, people don't realize that was along with Life magazine, was probably the preeminent photographic magazine of its time. Edited by a wonderful guy named Robert Hayes, who unfortunately died in the first rush of the AIDS epidemic, but a great editor. And he was really responsible for what caused Interview to be such a great magazine, because they'd have the finest photographers doing portraiture of people. And then you'd have a interview text opposite the big picture. So, and I was working at Time Inc. at that time as an advertising writer. So that was a nice detour for that. Certainly my time at Interview, I did maybe 5 or 6 pieces for them. Got fired twice and rehired back twice for different reasons. Going to South America to write articles on athletics and cocaine was a really interesting stuff. I think it was a magazine called Quest, whatever the year was, Quest, it changed title each year, Quest 89, Quest 90. So I went to South America with them, and that was great for them. I'm very grateful for all the advertising writing because it gave me a lot of rhythm and a lot of poetic stuff. I mean, if you think about it, advertising writing is very much like a song. Every word's got to count. And it's really almost like poetry in a sense. Every word of an advertisement has to be very skillfully done. And that was a literate form of advertising. We relaunched Life magazine by creating ads that go out and cause people to reach in their pockets and send money. And so that's a great proving ground for a writer to know how to write compellingly to cause people to take action. Even in screenwriting, that has a place, you know. A lot of we just joking the other day of a script is 183 pages. Well, we'll remove 40 pages worth of adjectives. You know, it's a very streamlined. It's got to sing, but it's very streamlined kind of writing.
I'm wondering if you would mind talking a little bit about what goes through your head as you're writing. Are you thinking of the financing aspects, like optioning screenplays? I know that you've traveled a lot to raise money for productions, or do you focus more on the art?
Are you thinking about the art and the commerce and everything? There's no question you have to do a blending of the two supremely because that's movie making. If you don't make money on the movie, if you don't make people money, then you're not going to be in the business for very, very long. We're very conscious of the economic realities as well as the obsessional creative stuff that has to occur. So you're blending those two things as you're doing that. I mean, you never know where something's going to come from. I might be on a fundraising trip to Texas like I was recently. And all of a sudden, you get a blindingly wonderful creative idea that fits into a script that you're working on. And you have to really read the room and all of that. I tend to err on the fact of wanting to give people the whole story. And sometimes that's just way too much.
There's very much an art to financing and deal structure and private equity, which carries over a little bit into film production.
Well, there's always a deal to be made on some level. If there's an axiom that I have, I realize there is a deal that can be creative and that can be financially viable.
Yeah, there's always an ebb and flow in negotiations. It's people have joked about comparing salespeople to actors in some ways, and I think that there's a little bit of truth to that.
Certainly, we're very involved every day in trying to figure out how to close deals. Sometimes you have to just not do anything and let the deal close itself. The thing about my life, it seems like I'm always going into uncharted territory. And that's a great thing, but it's also a thing that you're learning as you're going along.
Can you think of any ways in which some of your previous roles in anything from the Toxic Avenger to Under Siege 2 have sort of impacted how you perform in existing roles, like the Year of Living Dangerously?
I would like to think that my abilities as a transformational actor are growing. Each job is very different. I tend to be very improvisational. And, the comics I really admire. They look at a room and within 3 minutes of the time they've arrived at an event, they're coming up with scathing humor that's specifically to that environment. So I try to do as much advanced work as I possibly can. You asked about Toxic Avenger. That was a long time ago, and yeah, I just had fun with it. I would think I was heavily influenced by Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange by that one a little bit. So looking at the environment, you got a little baby eating tacos and just coming up with what you're doing. A lot of people think acting is not a creative act. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think you do all the back work and then you have to be ready to shed it or elaborate on it. I mean, I just did a horror film in Atlanta and I had done a lot of preparation of biblical. I was playing a minister, a reverend guiding this wagon train. And I'd done a lot of biblical stuff and gotten it ready. And some of that had to played a part. And then I had to discard a lot of it because you find yourself in a scene where all of a sudden just the basics, the essentials are what's required. I try not to fall back on tricks that I've used before for other parts. So you're constantly reinventing whatever you're doing. Each project is so different. You're coming up with different structures and different things in order to articulate that particular story in a very, very different way than that's been done before. To me, that's what's most exciting about this stuff.
There's always a joy in pursuing a challenge. There is a lot of creativity that has to go into designing scenes that are really cold-blooded, like killing somebody with an ice cream machine and Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I didn't make that up, though. They made that. Those guys did a great job with what they're doing. I thought it was the worst movie in all of civilization's history when I was doing it, but I wasn't in touch.
Trauma films were not for everybody, and they often operated under the guise of it's so bad that it's good in a way. So you're an avid shooter, right?
I have been. I was for decades, but we got so immersed in moviedom and producing movies and writing them, and we're very lucky with getting some script assignments and things that came our way that willingly I just have done nothing when I did it. When I learned I had totally lost all skill with a shotgun, which was shocking. So those things are sort of coming back as I do a little bit more. But yeah, it was my martial art for a couple of decades, 25 years or so. I'm still involved in the sense that I have a friend who's got a ranch, and it was really great to go back up and play with the weapons and shoot and stuff like that. And I did that with my son. But you get older, you got to choose what you spend your time doing. And if we're going to make the kind of dent that I would like us to make as a production company and as creators of movies, there haven't been a lot of time for hobbies in the last 7 or 8 years. And a hobby for us is playing with a grandkid for a little while, or maybe going to the Cannes Film Festival. So many things as you get older are alleviated if you use your body. And script writing involves sitting down. So you got to get out and use your body. I try to keep it balanced. So I think it's complicated by we have so much complicity by international entities now. It's who are the bad guys? For me, the ideals that America was founded are still paramount and worth my father fighting for. But I think he would be kind of appalled by some of the complicity that is going on. However, one remains hopeful, and one remains that this is a blessed life and we need to pass something along to our grandkids that will be meaningful. Eventually, you start thinking about what exactly, and I'm not so sure it's a legacy, because look, we just talked about people don't know who Jimi Hendrix and Marlon Brando are. But I feel a responsibility to our clients and to our stories and to the generations behind. What we try to do at the film company is actually produce things that we consider to be really meaningful. Now, I know that's a subjective thing, and I honor and revere a lot of the things that other people do, but they're not necessarily the things that we do. I think there's a lot of ways to be meaningful. Making people laugh is making them feel good about themselves. If a movie can do that, that's great. I'm thinking Will Ferrell movies. How much healthy laughter has Will Ferrell put into the world? We don't specifically do stuff like that, because a lot of times we take the projects that come to us and we get hired. So I wish they would do a Talladega Nights version of the NFL. Like they've done Blades of Glory and the basketball thing. I wish they would just do an NFL one. And I wonder why those guys stop, on a certain level. Where are they now? Where is Adam McKay? He's still very proactive and stuff. But we are going back to finish a movie called Dying for Living, which is an action piece. And my wife and I wrote it, and I'm starring in it with a long list of incredible action icons and champion athletes, people like Egan Machado and Nina Bergman and Costas Mandalore, the warrior of the first rank, and the Wall twins and Cynthia Rothrock, Chuck Liddell playing my brother, and really extraordinary people. And the team, Art Camacho and Stephen Colson, the cinematographer. These guys are brilliant in their own right. What people don't really appreciate is you talk about economics and hard work. They put together a thing just using Indiegogo and Kickstarter and raised an enormous amount of money relatively and did a superb job of running the show. I have my respect and admiration for Cynthia and her partner Robert Clancy is just immense. It's not easy to do stuff on Indiegogo, and it's a testament to her enduring fan base and the interest in retro martial arts movies. She's just an extraordinary figure, and I really am privileged to call her a friend. I just did a movie with Olivia Gruner, happiest guy as he goes about directing things. Former French commando director, and it's called Prayer for the Innocent. That's coming out. Bountiful with Paul and Patty Winters, a very elegant Western coming out. High hopes for that one, and extraordinary script. Very, very wonderful production. And thanks for listening.
Anytime. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
No, my pleasure, man. Good luck with the podcast, and we'll talk to you as things come out. We'll give you a ring back and see if you want to talk more.
I would love to. Thank you.